The Georgia sun hung low over the sprawling fields, painting the plantation in shades of gold and crimson. Magnolia trees lined the broken paths, their petals scattered across the dirt roads like forgotten memories. Hawthorne Plantation loomed ahead, a mansion of grandeur and decay, its white pillars stained with years of sun, sweat, and secrets. Elena Whitmore, a young governess recently hired to oversee the education of the plantation's children, rode slowly along the overgrown avenue, her eyes tracing the shadows that danced along the walls. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and damp earth, mixed with a lingering trace of smoke from the chimneys. Something about the place made her chest tighten, a tension she could neither name nor resist. She had heard whispers in town about the lady of the plantation, rumors that were whispered in hushed tones, voices trembling as if even speaking them aloud might summon the darkness itself. The mansion gates creaked as she pushed them open, revealing a courtyard choked with weeds and cracked fountains. The mansion's windows, dark and watchful, seemed to stare back at her, reflecting a story untold, a history drenched in shadows. Elena dismounted, her boots crunching on the gravel, and approached the front doors. Each step echoed, heavy and deliberate, as though the house itself marked her intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of old perfume. Portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her as she moved. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a warning she could not ignore. In the center of the main hall, a grand chandelier hung, its crystals dulled by years of neglect, yet still capturing the fading sunlight in fractured patterns. A sudden noise, a soft, deliberate footstep, made Elena turn sharply. Standing in the shadows framed by the doorway was the lady of the plantation. Tall, imposing, her presence commanded both fear and fascination. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, yet veiled with an unsettling charm. "You must be the new governess," she said, her voice low and smooth, carrying a weight that made Elena's skin crawl. "Welcome to Hawthorne Plantation. Here, nothing is as it seems, and everyone has a role to play." Elena swallowed, trying to steady her racing heart. "Yes, ma'am, I'm honored to serve." The lady's smile was thin, almost cruel, as she motioned toward the vast staircase. "Come, let me show you the estate, its beauty and its truths. Some are pleasant, others are meant to test your endurance, your loyalty, and your understanding of power." As Elena followed, the mansion seemed to shift around her, the shadows longer, the whispers closer, the air heavier. In the distance, the laughter of children echoed faintly, but it was laced with something unplaceable, a tension that suggested both innocence and corruption. The lady's gaze never left her, sharp and penetrating, as though she could read every thought, every fear, and every desire. Reaching the second floor, they passed rooms locked and sealed, their doors worn and scarred. The lady paused in front of one. "This room," she said, her tone almost reverent, "holds the secrets of my family. They are not for the faint of heart, but you may see more than others, because you will need to understand." Elena's pulse quickened. The weight of history pressed upon her, the air thick with anticipation and fear. She felt the unmistakable pull of something forbidden, dangerous, and intoxicating. The plantation was alive with stories, and she had stepped into the heart of a darkness that had festered for generations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mansion in deep shadows, Elena realized that Hawthorne Plantation was no ordinary estate. It was a place where desire and cruelty intertwined, where secrets were carefully sown like seeds, and where the lady of the house wielded her power like a conductor of an ominous symphony. Tonight, Elena was a newcomer, a witness, but soon she would discover that survival here meant understanding not only the plantation's past, but the hidden, twisted desires that had shaped its very foundation. The doors closed behind her with a final resonant thud, and in the silence the mansion seemed to whisper, "Welcome to Hawthorne, welcome to the truth you were never meant to see." Night had fallen over Hawthorne Plantation, and the shadows of the mansion seemed to move with a life of their own. Candles flickered in the hallways, casting long, twisting silhouettes that crept along the walls, whispering secrets no one dared to speak aloud. Elena lay awake in the guest room, the events of her first day replaying in her mind. The lady's piercing gaze, the locked rooms, the chilling sense of hidden stories. It all pressed upon her like a weight she could not lift. A soft sound drew her attention, a faint scraping from the corridor outside her door. She held her breath, straining to listen. Footsteps, or was it the floorboards settling, as the lady had said, the house alive and watching? She slowly rose, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The candlelight revealed portraits of grim ancestors, their eyes dark and accusatory, seeming to follow her every movement. As she passed the grand staircase, she caught a glimpse of movement in the shadowed corner. A young slave boy, no older than 12, peered at her from behind a pillar. His eyes were wide, filled with fear and something else, a warning, perhaps, or a plea. Elena knelt, trying to speak softly. "It's all right. I won't hurt you. Tell me, what is this place?" The boy hesitated, glancing toward the closed doors of the ladies' chambers. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be here, not at night. Secrets, dangerous secrets. They eat those who look too close." Elena's pulse quickened. "Secrets? What kind of secrets?" He shook his head, fear tightening his small shoulders. Things about the family, about the children, about how we are used. You don't want to know, ma'am." Despite the warning, Elena felt an irresistible pull. Her curiosity burned brighter than her fear. She helped the boy move back into the shadows and returned to her room, her mind racing. Every corner of the mansion seemed to whisper, every closed door a barrier to truths too horrifying to imagine. The next morning, the plantation bustled with life. The lady moved with precision, overseeing the daily routines of slaves and servants, her presence a mixture of elegance and intimidation. Elena followed closely, observing the children and young men, some playing, others working silently, their eyes reflecting obedience tinged with despair. She could see the subtle fear in their movements, the way they flinched at the lady's voice or hesitated when passing near her. In the afternoon, Elena found herself in the library, an expansive room lined with shelves of ancient texts and ledgers. A book had fallen open on the table, revealing entries that chilled her to the core. Names, dates, and cryptic notes detailing the breeding of slaves, the twisted power of the lady, and the carefully maintained control over life and blood on the plantation. The journal was written in meticulous detail, a combination of cold calculation and obsession, showing a mind consumed by desire and dominance. Her hands trembled as she read, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and decay. The truth of the rumors she had heard in town was laid bare before her eyes. Hawthorne Plantation was not merely a home, it was a stage for cruelty, a theater of forbidden acts, and the lady's ambitions extended beyond mere wealth or power. It was control, lineage, and a perverse legacy she intended to enforce. Footsteps approached, breaking her from the page. She hid the book beneath her shawl just as the lady entered. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Miss Whitmore," she said softly, her gaze piercing. "But it is also enlightening. You may see more than others, yes, but be warned, every secret comes with a price. Those who look too closely often cannot look away from the darkness they find." Elena swallowed hard, the weight of the lady's words pressing against her chest. She knew she had crossed an invisible threshold. She had glimpsed the shadows lurking within the walls of Hawthorne Plantation. And as the day faded into evening, she realized that survival here would demand more than courage. It would demand understanding, discretion, and a careful navigation of a world where desire and cruelty intertwined in ways she had never imagined. Outside, the magnolia trees swayed under the evening breeze, their petals rustling softly like whispers, echoing the secrets the plantation refused to release. Elena looked toward the darkened halls, her resolve hardening. She had seen the first hints of the twisted power of the lady and the plantation's hidden truths. She could not turn back now, not when the shadows had already begun to reach for her, inviting her into a story of sin, control, and forbidden desire that would consume everything she thought she knew about morality, loyalty, and herself. Night had fallen like a shroud over Hawthorne Plantation. The wind whispered through the magnolia trees, carrying the faint cries of animals and the distant murmurs of laborers settling for the evening. Elena could not sleep. The visions of the journals, the hidden rooms, and the subtle cruelty she had glimpsed consumed her thoughts. She rose quietly from her bed, pulling her shawl tightly around her, and descended the creaking staircase, each step a deliberate intrusion into the mansion's breathing shadows. The hallways were empty, but the air was thick with anticipation, as if the house itself was aware of her presence. Elena's fingers brushed against the worn wood of the banister, tracing the intricate carvings that had once held pride, but now seemed sinister, almost alive. At the end of the corridor, she noticed a door partially concealed behind a heavy tapestry, a door she had not seen before. Her heartbeat quickened. Drawn by both dread and curiosity, she reached for the iron handle. It was cold to the touch, the metal rough and unyielding. With a soft push, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. A pungent, earthy smell rose from below, mixed with the faint scent of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp. Elena swallowed hard but took the first step downward. The shadows swallowed her, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. At the bottom, she entered a hidden chamber, her lantern-illuminated walls lined with shelves of jars, ledgers, and sketches. Each jar contained remnants of herbs, powders, and liquids labeled in meticulous handwriting. The ledgers detailed the lady's careful planning, genetic records, lineage charts, and notes about the slaves she controlled. Elena's breath caught. The lady's obsession with bloodlines, obedience, and lineage was written in black ink across every page. It was a history of control, desire, and exploitation, preserved in horrifying detail. A sound behind her made her spin. Shadows shifted in the corners of the chamber. The lantern trembled in her hand. A figure emerged from the darkness, the lady herself, tall, composed, her eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and menace. "You've found the chamber," the lady said softly, her voice calm yet icy. "Few ever do. Those who stumble here rarely leave unchanged." Elena felt both fear and a strange fascination. Why keep all this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The lady smiled, a thin, predatory curve of lips. "Knowledge is power, control is survival, and history belongs to those bold enough to write it. Every choice, every birth, every act. It shapes the destiny of this plantation, and those who are unaware suffer the consequences." Elena's eyes scanned the room again, lingering on a set of ledgers detailing the careful breeding of slaves, the tracking of bloodlines, and the systematic control of families. Each entry was clinical, almost surgical, yet beneath the ink was an unmistakable hunger for dominion and desire, blurring the line between cruelty and obsession. "You see, Miss Whitmore," the lady continued, stepping closer, "power is never given freely. It is cultivated, preserved, and sometimes it is taken. This plantation, these lives, this legacy. It all depends on the threads I weave, and now you are part of its fabric. You may witness, or you may falter. The choice is yours." Elena swallowed hard, realizing the weight of her presence in this hidden world. The shadows around them seemed to grow, the darkness pressing closer, whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. She could not turn away. Curiosity had ensnared her, binding her to the fate of the plantation and the terrifying woman who ruled it. As the lady turned to leave, she added softly, almost conspiratorially, "Beware the children. They are both innocent and instruments of destiny. Watch them closely, learn, survive, and never underestimate what fear can teach you." Elena was left alone in the chamber, the lantern casting flickering light across the walls. She traced her fingers along the ledgers and jars, absorbing the magnitude of the secrets she had uncovered. The plantation was alive, not merely with labor and life, but with a centuries-long orchestration of power, control, and forbidden desire. And now she was entangled in it, a silent witness to horrors and obsessions that few could endure. Above her, the mansion groaned and settled. Outside, the wind carried whispers, the rustle of magnolia leaves like faint echoes of the enslaved and the powerful alike. Elena realized that nothing at Hawthorne Plantation was as it seemed, and that the darkness she had discovered was only the beginning. Tonight, she was no longer merely a governess. She was a witness, a student of cruelty and desire, and a participant in a story that stretched beyond decades, beyond morality, and into the hidden, twisted legacy of Hawthorne Plantation. The dawn of another oppressive Georgia morning filtered through the tall, arched windows of Hawthorne Plantation. The sunlight struggled to pierce the thick curtains, leaving the grand halls bathed in a dim, golden haze that seemed almost unreal, like a painting of life suspended between beauty and decay. Elena Whitmore moved carefully through the corridors, her hands grazing the cold, carved banisters. The knowledge she had unearthed in the hidden chamber weighed heavily on her mind. The ledgers, the jars, the meticulous records, all painted a portrait of desire, obsession, and control so calculated it was almost unbearable to witness. Yet, despite the horror, a dark curiosity pulled her deeper into the mysteries of the mansion. The Lady of Hawthorne, ever observant, appeared as if summoned by Elena's thoughts. She was descending the grand staircase, her long silk dress whispering against the marble, the subtle fragrance of roses and something sharper lingering in the air. Her eyes, piercing and enigmatic, met Elena's. "You linger too long among shadows," she said, her voice both admonishing and teasing. "The plantation has a rhythm. Every life, every heartbeat within these walls moves to it. Those who do not follow often stumble and break." Elena nodded, though inside she felt a storm. I need to understand," she said softly. "I need to see everything to know what this place has been." The lady smiled thinly, a predator's smile. "Very well, today you shall see more than the ledgers can tell, but be warned, knowledge can ignite both fear and desire sometimes at the same time. You must tread carefully, for both can consume you if unchecked." They moved together through the house, passing the closed doors of rooms that were forbidden even to most servants. Behind them, the walls seemed to hum, alive with the echoes of laughter, screams, and whispered secrets from generations long past. As they reached the eastern wing, the lady paused at a grand, crimson-draped door. It was taller than any other in the house, carved with intricate symbols that seemed to writhe under the faint light. "This," she said, her hand resting lightly on the handle, "is where the heart of Hawthorne beats most intensely. Here, bloodlines and power, desire and control meet and collide. Enter carefully, Miss Whitmore. What you see may haunt you, or awaken something in you you never expected." Elena's pulse raced, but she followed, stepping into a room that was warmer than the rest of the mansion, yet strangely suffocating. The walls were lined with portraits of men and women, their eyes full of secrets, shame, and longing. The floor was polished to a reflective sheen, and in the center of the room lay a large, ornate bed draped in crimson velvet. The sheets, though carefully arranged, seemed to pulse with history, as if the bed itself remembered every touch, every act of power and submission that had taken place upon it. The lady's voice was a whisper now, almost intimate. "The children, the family, and the slaves, they all exist here under the veil of my design. Control, influence, and desire are intertwined. Nothing happens by accident. Everything is orchestrated." Elena's stomach tightened as she took in the room. The portraits were not merely decorative. They were records, visual diaries of acts that defied morality, chronicling the lady's manipulation of bloodlines, obedience, and the most forbidden passions. It was a history of domination, secrecy, and twisted love, a world Elena had never imagined could exist. Suddenly, a soft sound from behind the bed drew her attention. A young slave girl peeked from behind the velvet drapes, her eyes wide with both fear and cautious hope. "Ma'am," she whispered, "please, do not let them see you here. They are dangerous." The lady's gaze softened slightly, though it still held an unyielding authority. "They live in my world. Some accept it, others resist, and all are shaped by it. Learn from them, Miss Whitmore. Watch, listen, and survive. Only then can you understand the depth of the plantation's secrets." Elena felt a shiver, a mixture of horror and fascination. The veil of crimson, the warmth of the room, the portraits, and the hidden whispers of slaves and children. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and deeply seductive. She realized that Hawthorne Plantation was not merely a place of labor and residence. It was a carefully orchestrated stage for power, desire, and forbidden acts, and she, now entangled in its web, was both witness and participant. Hours passed as Elena explored the room under the lady's careful watch. Each piece of furniture, every painting, every whisper of the floorboards told a story of secrecy, desire, and manipulation. The young slaves moved cautiously around them, their glances full of warnings and subtle hints about the power dynamics at play. Elena absorbed it all, each revelation pulling her deeper into a web she could not escape. As night descended, the mansion transformed. Shadows stretched and twisted across the walls, magnolia petals rustled in the courtyard below, and the moonlight bathed the plantation in a cold, silver glow. The lady guided Elena to a small, ornate balcony overlooking the estate. From there, Elena could see the sprawling fields, the distant river glinting like a thread of silver, and the distant cottages of the laborers, where whispers of fear and longing carried on the wind. "Everything you see," the lady said, her voice soft but commanding, "exists because of choices, some cruel, some calculated, some born of desire. The plantation is a living testament to the past, and every soul within it is a part of that history. Watch closely, Elena, learn and understand, for the day will come when you must decide what part of this history you will carry with you." Elena pressed her hand to the balcony railing, the wind tugging at her hair, her mind reeling from the enormity of what she had witnessed. She realized that Hawthorne was not just a plantation. It was a crucible, a place where innocence, power, and desire collided. And she, caught in its center, had no choice but to confront the truths it demanded she see. The night deepened, the mansion settling into a quiet that was both unnatural and expectant. Elena knew that this was only the beginning. The veil of crimson desire had been lifted, and what lay ahead was a tangled web of forbidden acts, secrets, and passions that would challenge everything she had ever known about morality, power, and herself. And as the magnolia petals swirled in the moonlit courtyard, a whisper reached her ears, a faint, chilling murmur. "The deeper you look, the less you can turn away." The plantation was silent under the oppressive Georgia sun, yet the air felt heavy with secrets, each shadow seemingly alive with whispered warnings. Elena had spent countless hours observing the mansion, its inhabitants, and the intricate web of control the lady wielded. Every glance, every movement, and every hushed conversation revealed more than the ledgers or journals ever could. Hawthorne Plantation was not merely a home. It was a theater, orchestrated by a woman whose obsession with power and lineage knew no bounds. The lady's children moved through the halls with a mixture of obedience and fear, their youthful innocence tainted by the silent weight of their mother's ambition. Elena watched them from the shadows, noting the subtle ways in which they were molded, the obedience drilled into them like iron into the soul. She could see how fear and desire had been intertwined, shaping their every thought and action. Today, the lady had summoned Elena to a private chamber, the air thick with perfume and tension. The room was warm, its crimson drapes filtering the sunlight into a rich, bloody glow. The lady stood by the fireplace, her posture regal, her gaze unwavering. "You've seen much, Elena," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "But now you will see how loyalty and betrayal intertwine." Elena felt a shiver. "What do you mean?" The lady's smile was thin, almost cruel. The plantation is more than bloodlines and obedience. It is about control, about understanding who can be trusted and who will falter. Secrets are powerful, but betrayal is the currency of survival. A servant entered, bowing low, and handed the lady a small, sealed letter. She tore it open and read silently, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Elena, her eyes cold and sharp. "There is someone here who questions my authority," she said. "Someone who whispers behind closed doors, who thinks themselves clever. You will observe, learn, and report. Their actions may cost them dearly, and you will understand the weight of the choices I make." Elena followed, silently moving through the corridors, her senses heightened. She watched as the lady's son, a boy of 17, argued quietly with one of the older slaves, his words laced with arrogance and defiance. The boy's voice trembled at times, betraying the fear beneath his bravado. Elena saw the subtle shift in power, the way the lady's presence dominated even without entering the room. Later, in the privacy of the lady's private study, Elena was shown a series of ledgers and letters detailing the family's careful manipulation of bloodlines. Names, dates, and relationships intertwined with acts of control, desire, and discipline. Each entry revealed a meticulous plan, a strategy that ensured the family's power remained unchallenged. Elena could hardly breathe. The magnitude of the lady's influence over both her children and the slaves was staggering. "You see," the lady said softly, her hand resting on Elena's shoulder, "loyalty is tested by the understanding of consequences. Betrayal is punished swiftly, but knowledge is preserved for those who dare to witness. Observe, Elena. Learn who can be trusted, who cannot, and how power shapes every soul within these walls." As dusk fell, the plantation seemed to hold its breath, the shadows lengthened, and the whispers of those long past seemed to echo faintly in the corridors. Elena realized that she had entered a world where morality, fear, and desire were inextricably linked, where obedience was demanded, and where the consequences of betrayal were both swift and cruel. Outside, the fields were bathed in the last light of the setting sun, the magnolia petals glinting like fragile tears. Elena felt the enormity of what she had witnessed, the depth of the plantation's secrets pressing against her chest. She understood now that survival depended not only on courage, but on careful observation, discretion, and a profound understanding of the twisted desires that had shaped Hawthorne Plantation for generations. And in the quiet, a whisper reached her ears once more, a chilling reminder: in this place, loyalty is bought with fear, and betrayal is paid in blood. The night was thick and suffocating over Hawthorne Plantation. A heavy mist had rolled in from the river, curling around the magnolia trees and cloaking the fields in a spectral haze. Elena moved cautiously through the hallways, her lantern casting trembling light against the portraits of grim ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her every step. She had seen much now, enough to understand that Hawthorne was a crucible of fear, desire, and control. Yet, what lay ahead would surpass anything she had imagined. The lady of the house emerged from the shadows, her presence a mixture of elegance and menace. She beckoned Elena to follow without a word, leading her to the eastern wing, where the air grew warmer, heavy with the scent of incense and something sharper. Blood, perhaps, or the faint remnants of rituals long forgotten. "This is where the true heart of Hawthorne beats," the lady said softly, her voice echoing in the corridor. "Tonight, you will witness what has been hidden from most eyes. What you see may unbalance you, but understanding it is your only chance of survival." They entered a vast chamber illuminated by candlelight, the shadows dancing like living things across the crimson walls. In the center of the room lay an intricate tapestry of velvet, gold, and silk, embroidered with symbols that Elena could barely decipher. Around it, the lady's children, young and old, and several slaves moved in silent obedience, each performing tasks she could not yet fully comprehend. The lady's control was absolute, her influence over every movement, every glance undeniable. Elena's breath caught as she noticed the subtle interactions, acts of obedience intertwined with undercurrents of fear, desire, and manipulation. The lady's sons, now older and more aware of their roles, moved with a strange mixture of pride and unease. Elena realized with growing horror that the lady's design was not only about control, it was about shaping lineage, cultivating obedience, and enforcing a twisted legacy that intertwined blood, power, and desire. "You see," the lady whispered, her gaze piercing Elena's, "everything is deliberate. Every act, every glance, every secret. It is all part of a larger design. Those who fail, those who betray, they pay dearly. Those who observe may survive if they understand." Suddenly, a loud cry echoed from the corner of the chamber. Elena turned to see one of the slaves trembling, caught attempting to defy a command. The lady's eyes hardened, and in a swift, almost ritualistic motion, she imposed punishment that was both calculated and terrifying. The air seemed to vibrate with tension, the walls echoing with the suppressed anguish of those present. Elena's stomach churned as she realized the depth of cruelty and precision the lady wielded. Yet amidst the fear, there was an undeniable, intoxicating pull. Elena felt herself drawn to the dynamics of power, the way control and desire coexisted, feeding off each other, shaping every soul in the room. She knew that understanding this would be key to navigating the perilous world she had entered. Hours passed, each moment steeped in tension, secrecy, and forbidden knowledge. The lady moved through the room like a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of obedience, fear, and calculated passion. Elena observed silently, absorbing every detail, the subtle glances, the whispered commands, the delicate balance between loyalty and rebellion. Finally, the lady turned to Elena, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of approval and warning. "You see now," she said softly, "the power of knowledge, the price of curiosity, and the weight of secrets. Hawthorne demands understanding, respect, and cunning. Remember this, Miss Whitmore. You are no longer merely a witness. You are a participant, and soon you will be tested." Elena left the chamber, her heart pounding, the candlelight flickering against her pale face. The shadows of the mansion seemed to close in around her, whispering echoes of fear, desire, and inevitable consequences. She realized that survival would require more than courage. It would demand mastery of the unspoken rules of Hawthorne, a careful reading of both allies and enemies, and a willingness to confront the darkness within herself. Outside, the magnolia trees swayed under the night breeze, petals glinting like silver in the pale moonlight. Elena knew the time was coming when she would be forced to confront the lady, the children, and the twisted hierarchy of the plantation. And in that confrontation, secrets would be revealed, loyalties tested, and lives. Perhaps even her own would hang in the balance. The night deepened, and the plantation slept fitfully under the watchful stars. Yet Elena could feel it, the pulse of Hawthorne, alive and unyielding, a living testament to desire, control, and the dangerous legacy that had been cultivated for generations. And in the shadows, the whispered promise lingered: those who seek the truth must be ready to face the inferno it awakens. The first light of dawn struggled to pierce the thick fog that clung to the fields of Hawthorne Plantation. The mansion stood like a silent sentinel, its walls heavy with centuries of secrets, and the air carried the faint scent of magnolias, damp earth, and something darker, a lingering trace of cruelty and desire that had shaped every soul within. Elena Whitmore moved through the corridors, her heart heavy yet steady, the weight of all she had witnessed pressing upon her like a living entity. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, the punishment, the whispered secrets, the intricate power dynamics, and the chilling control the lady wielded over both her children and the slaves. Every glance, every subtle command, every act of obedience or defiance had revealed the meticulous orchestration of a legacy built on fear, desire, and manipulation. Elena knew now that the moment of reckoning had come. In the grand hall, the Lady of Hawthorne awaited, her posture regal, her expression a mixture of pride, menace, and anticipation. Around her, the children and the older slaves assembled, silent and watchful. Each face reflected the weight of years spent under the lady's control, the subtle fear, the forced obedience, and the internalized understanding of the consequences of rebellion. "You have seen much, Elena," the lady said, her voice calm yet commanding, resonating through the hall. "You have observed, learned, and endured. Now the plantation demands clarity. The past cannot remain buried forever, and the consequences of loyalty and betrayal must be revealed." Elena's gaze swept across the room, taking in the intricate web of power that had ensnared every life within the mansion. She saw the subtle glances exchanged between the children, the restrained movements of the slaves, the tension that coiled in every corner. She understood that this was more than punishment or discipline. It was a demonstration of control, a manifestation of the lady's calculated legacy. The lady gestured toward a young slave, trembling yet defiant, caught in the act of subtle rebellion. "This one questions authority," she said, her eyes sharp. "They have been given opportunity and guidance, yet defiance persists. Watch closely, Elena. Understand what occurs when fear and loyalty collide." The punishment was swift, precise, and deeply unnerving, a calculated lesson delivered with elegance and cruelty intertwined. Elena's stomach churned, yet her mind absorbed every detail, every subtle cue, every reaction that revealed the complexity of human obedience and the consequences of defiance. She realized that the lady's power was not merely in her actions, but in the anticipation of them, in the fear and understanding she cultivated in every soul within the plantation. Hours passed as the demonstration continued, each act a lesson in control, power, and the dangerous legacy of Hawthorne. Elena felt herself transformed, not merely a witness, but a participant in the moral and emotional landscape of the plantation. She understood the delicate balance of fear, desire, and obedience, and the responsibilities she now bore as one who had seen the full extent of the secrets and sins that defined Hawthorne. As twilight approached, the lady turned her gaze fully upon Elena. "You have observed, endured, and survived," she said. "Now you must choose. Will you carry this knowledge forward, wield it with caution, or allow it to consume you? The plantation is alive, and it will test you. Every decision, every action carries weight. Remember this, and never underestimate the consequences of understanding too much." Elena nodded, her resolve firming. She had entered Hawthorne as an outsider, a governess seeking knowledge. She would leave if she left at all, as someone who understood the intricate dance of power, desire, and fear that governed the lives within these walls. The plantation's secrets had been revealed to her, and the choices before her were now hers to make. As night fell over the sprawling estate, the magnolia trees swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the moonlight like pale, trembling spirits. The mansion itself seemed to exhale, releasing centuries of whispers into the night. Elena stood on the balcony, looking out over the fields, the river glinting like silver, and the distant cottages of the laborers, and she understood the full weight of what she had witnessed. Hawthorne Plantation was more than a home. It was a crucible of human desire, cruelty, and ambition. It was a stage for the darkest passions and the most meticulously calculated acts of control. And for Elena, it had become a world she could never fully escape, a legacy she could never fully forget, and a story she would carry forever, a story of fear, desire, and survival in a place where every shadow held a secret, and every secret demanded its reckoning. The mansion stood silent under the stars, yet Elena knew that Hawthorne's pulse would never fade. Its whispers, its secrets, its power, they would endure, awaiting the next observer brave and